what are we standing up for? The ability, the freedom to do what's right as God defines that right.
God's the ultimate author of liberty.
We don't want government to stand between us and our freedom to do what is right.
Knight takes bishop, bishop takes queen. Checkmate. China's playing chess. Biden is playing checkers. Welcome to the Bible Nation podcast. I'm Doug Levesque. Here with me today is Pastor Jason Georges from Emmanuel Baptist Church in Corunna, Michigan. BibleNation.org, that's the website. You can find all of our articles and books, all of our podcasts on there. We're glad to have you today. Remember, the best culture is the Bible culture. It's proven and it works. There's a lot going on in America today. We're going to start a new series here on the podcast entitled America, What's Next? We'll have at least 5 topics in this, and we'll be covering this most of the season. We'll be talking about the possibilities of civil war, constitutional change, cultural suicide. But today, we're going to talk about Chinese checkmate. For a lot of years, people have been saying that sometime China's going to reclaim Taiwan as their own. And with Russia taking Ukraine under the same auspices, the fear for China taking Taiwan has escalated and elevated tremendously. And so we're going to talk about all that China's doing, all that we're doing, and the biblical ramifications of that as well. Pastor Jay, hello.
Yeah.
Welcome home. You've just gotten back from taking a whole bunch of high school seniors to Washington, D.C.
I got to tour our nation's capital and to kind of see the foundations of a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about here. And I was thinking, what an introduction, because we are talking about a global chess match that's happening. And of course, as Bible advocates, we have a perspective that this global chess match extends beyond even the personalities, the human elements. And really, these are the chessboard pieces that are being played between God and the devil.
Yeah.
Paul,
we wrestle not against
right. Paul reminds us we wrestle not against principalities and power, flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. But it is a conflict. You know, why does this happen? Why are these discussions important for us today? Because it is the contrast of different worldviews.
Right.
And so now we're in China. We see the growing and influence of a worldview or a culture or a style of government that has shunned or ignores Bible principles.
It's a atheistic, communistic, anti-God. The best that they would have is some sort of Buddhist or spiritual tradition, but ultimately it elevates man. And that's why they have the supreme leader, you know. And that's why Mao's Little Red Book is the second bestseller only to the Bible, because, you know, that's their New Testament that they keep, the little red book there. And was there anything in Washington D.C. that you saw this time that you hadn't seen before? Was there? Because every time I go to D.C., I kind of see something new or learn something new.
You know, first time I ever went to the Air and Space Museum, and so it had been closed the last couple of years, and had never really been. It's always takes a line to get in there and whatnot. So I was able.
They have the moon capsule that supposedly went to moon.
That's
right.
we either went through a museum or the greatest propaganda piece ever.
Right.
But
they have legit stuff in there.
Yeah, no, they have about space flight and whatnot, and or about flights, and they have the Wright brothers plane and those kind of things.
Do you ever get tired of traveling with high school seniors?
Oh yeah, no, it's fun, but the opportunity, especially as our ministry grows in our high school and our students, to be able to spend 1 week with them, because now they're about to launch. They're 3 weeks from graduation, and then they get summer jobs in earnest. In the past, most of these students as summers have been involved with church ministry, Maximum Impact Camp and Teen Camp and all those different things. But this is the first summer that they kind of their focus shifts to preparing for college, preparing for the next step. So they're having to get jobs for real and earn some money for real. And so this is my last opportunity to spend a week with them outside of our, regular contacts. Before they launch. Yeah, so it's a good time.
I don't know how many of our teens or how many teenagers are watching Bible Nation podcasts and all the things that we talk about. So many things probably fill your mind at that age that you kind of don't want to hear, maybe some of the things that seem negative or whatever. But I hope that we can bridge that gap, in some respect, and maybe find that. If you're listening and you know how to bridge that gap with a podcast like this for teenagers, hey, share your ideas. We'll take it, because we love teenagers. Well, let's get back to talking about China. Obviously, the history is that Taiwan used to be part of General China. The Japanese took it, and And so therefore, when Chiang Kai-shek had his civil war with the communists at the end of World War II, the communists basically won. Now, America had generals and troops and intelligence and support on both sides. We were supporting communists against Japan, and we were supporting nationalists against Japan. Chiang Kai-shek went to Taiwan, and just as the Japanese called for missionaries, Chiang Kai-shek called for missionaries. And so American missionaries went to Taiwan and went to Japan and went to Korea. And so there's a level of Christianity in those places. In the Philippines, I mean, there always was in the Philippines, but
a foothold.
yeah, a foothold,
Yeah.
And a culture that's not entirely so that Western culture, they'd call it, was somewhat Christian culture, and so ever since there's been this divide across the Taiwan Straits, and the Taiwan Straits is it's a difficult thing. All Russia had to do was step across the line, and they were in Ukraine, and they would say we've had Ukraine for 150 years, and China's kind of trying to make the same claim, whereas much of the Western world has said we accept Taiwan more or less as a nation, and their determination is what we're supporting. In other words, we're kind of, vague about it, and so, but China's always said they wanted it back. They said we're going to get it by 2050. That was moved up here in the last decade to 2030, and as of the last couple of days, the Pentagon says 2027. Congress just had a war. Their war committee just had a war game with some congressional leaders and some think tanks. And they said by 2027 this is going to happen. So the clock is ticking. It could be before that, right?
That Taiwan is going to go back to China.
Well, that China is going to
get it
militarily.
Grab it, right.
It's been trying to get it, philosophically. It's been trying to get it
economically,
diplomatically, whatever.
yeah.
Hasn't happened. The United States really is backing Taiwan in that regards. Where Biden said we're not going to have boots on the ground in Ukraine, he has definitely said we are going to have boots on the ground in Taiwan. And so since Russia kicked off, this thing has just popped up. Everybody's waiting for China to do something. What's the United States going to do? Here's a great article entitled, "What Might Happen Next? How a Chinese Invasion of Taiwan Could Impact the United States. A Chinese blockade of Taiwan could reverberate globally, sparking market shocks, but U.S. politicians say protecting the island is a war worth fighting." So really left and right. And this is one of the few areas where Congress and the president, in the left and the right and the media, everyone says protect Taiwan. It's just one of those rare things that just makes sense completely to do that. And one of the reasons is because Taiwan basically battled China over who can make the best superconductor microchips. Taiwan won hands down. Their product is 10 times better than China's, and the West wants it. And so now China says we got to have it. I mean, it's almost everything has a superconductor in it.
Right.
And so basically, Taiwan trumps Israel in that
Technology.
regard. So yeah, it's just a providential thing that it's so important. We're not fighting over gold. We're not fighting over oil. We're fighting over the most precise microcomputing chip that's necessary for self-driving cars, AI, every cell phone on the market, every computer, etc. And so it kind of is a lifeblood place, And so why not? I mean, there's going to be a war there.
Well, and technology has made these type of things vital resources. So just like in time past, when the world was more agricultural, so the ability to produce food and ship it was a vital resource.
Yeah.
Then we get into oil and coal and energy sources, but now these technological sources are vital resources to national economies.
Right.
And whoever controls them. Now, we experienced this here recently in America. You couldn't buy a brand new car for a little while.
Right.
Well, why? Because not that we didn't have the metal to buy the car or the rubber for the wheels. We didn't have the microchips.
Right.
And so we live in mid-Michigan, right?
Yeah.
We're right outside of Flint. There was about a year there, remember?
We are the auto industry.
Right. You could drive by Flint, and there were vast fields of brand new cars,
waiting
trucks
for chips.
that had no chips.
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds.
We actually have people in the church that worked there that would have a universal chip. In order to drive the car off the production line, they would put the chip in, drive it to storage, take the chip out so they could go drive the next car.
Yeah.
Like that's how short we were on chips.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, crazy too, crazy.
Yeah.
And you wonder then, COVID being a part of that, COVID being a play, it being a pawn, in the chess game of what's going on there. So I think since World War II ended, and then Mao had the Communist Revolution, where basically he killed 50 million of his own population, right? And these were people that may have been partially connected to the Taiwanese style of Chinese culture and governance or whatever else. I mean, they called it a cultural revolution. That this has been in the works. Richard Nixon went in 1973, finally opened the door to communist China. He did it as a way to check Russia, right? That we can't let China and Russia be friends. We have to open this up. And so ever since, China's been playing a kind of faux capitalism, right? We'll trade with Korea and Japan are too tough. Even the Philippines is tough. They fought Vietnam. After we left Vietnam, China fought. The Vietnamese lost another million people against China.
Yeah, where do they all come from?
And now the Vietnamese are like a technologically advanced country. And so, I don't think it's just that they, obviously they have to have a military to defend themselves from those strong governments, but trading with those people has helped their economy. I mean, they've actually become a middle-income type of country and created wealth.
Which creates its own problems internally for them.
Sure, because people want
people
want
want things.
Yeah,
they want things.
Free. But more or less, the one thing that they can't have is this Taiwanese identity splitting them.
Right.
And so that's going to be the point of war.
And the reason this is becoming a discussion point now is for whatever the political reasons of Ukraine, and we would hold that some of them are not as pure and pristine as the media is telling us.
Sure.
It is depleting Russia's capabilities.
Yes.
And that capability, because they share a border or they are in the same region, demanded of China to allocate resources in defense against Russia.
Right.
Well, a weakened Russia now means China can allocate those same resources and redivert them towards advancement in Taiwan, the continued occupation, takeover, transformation of Hong Kong.
Right.
And now, without any democratic which is a worldview, any democratic societies or governments on the Asian continent that can stand against. Now there's an advancement of communism.
One of India kind of stands against China in that regard, but India's really gets a lot of their military prowess from Russia too. And so if Russia's weakened and India's kind of held off, India has to look to the West or something.
It's destabilizing.
It's destabilizing there. And the other thing I mentioned just before the podcast started is I said, if for some reason China is if we can play this chess game out to where they don't undermine us and they don't necessarily take Taiwan, or if they do take Taiwan, the next step is to take Eastern Russia.
Part of Russia.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because they need space, they need resources. There's water resources, farming resources, lumber resources, and mineral resources. And they could go all the way up to the Urals in European Russia, and there's some biblical ramifications of that as well.
And we were talking about that, and I think we're going to get to it in our notes here a little bit, but the idea that this is a battle over commodities, and there are new commodities that are essential to the world market that weren't before.
Yes.
And so, there's things that are found in Serbia or in Siberia that China would really want.
China has won the battle at minerals.
Yeah.
China has, the whole, they've won that game. That's almost a done deal. And not just their own minerals, but having companies in Russia getting Russia's minerals, having companies in Africa and South America getting their minerals. And those minerals are used for this new, battery-operated society, battery-operated cars, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the ways they're using, I call it communist capitalism.
Yeah.
They're cheating at the free market because the Communist Party said, hey, let's take some of our money and let's create a company and go do business in the United States. Let's create a company and let's go do business in this sector in Europe, right? So they're playing with that, but they're using state money, which is, taxed money or made up money, right? And so they can go and leverage and do better in Europe or the United States than, say, you and I could do.
Which disrupts the natural equilibrium of supply and demand that capitalism depends on. So when you have the infusion of a state, so now it's not a business and supply and demand market, but now you have a state artificially inserting itself into that market. That's what you're saying in pseudo.
It would be interesting to get a list of the companies that China functions with over here. I know,
or owns.
The Chinese Communist Party, under those different auspices, has a law firm out of San Francisco, and Nancy Pelosi's husband has been one of the chief attorneys for them. Who's he representing? Who's Nancy Pelosi representing? I know she went to Taiwan, but what game is being played here? on what's going on. But cheating at the free market. Here's an article: Chinese tech companies are exploiting U.S. green energy goals. Former State Department officials warn. Subnational incursions are afoot. China is on the hunt. Former U.S. ambassador tells Fox News Digital. And like, for instance, here in Michigan, there are several tech companies that have come in to Michigan and are getting some of the money that the state of Michigan or that the federal government gives to new company startups. And so it's competing against American companies, and in some cases here winning, and then getting access to our digital markets. And China's tech theft is incredible, but they're doing it through this idea of being in free market capitalism. And of course, Governor Whitmer has signed on to that, celebrating that, saying it's jobs, when in reality it's not jobs.
There was just a protest here in Michigan about a Chinese company that is trying to come in to get Michigan approval to come in at Goshen or and there was protests about it. I'm trying to find an article on it real quick. Goshen, G-O-T-I-O-N. I know one of the groups I was formerly a part of or helped with, Stand Up Michigan, had a protest, no go on Goshen. And that was over in West Michigan.
It'd be very ironic if we move toward electric vehicles to the numbers that the Biden administration is talking about, and the key components come from China. The batteries come from China. And so California, again, Nancy Pelosi's nephew is Gavin Newsom, who might be running for president, who's running California, the biggest state, probably the 5th largest economy in the world as a nation. And they're making laws getting rid of gas-powered lawnmowers and tools and these kinds of things, and going to batteries. Well, where do all these batteries come from? They come from China. So China is playing a chess game, and they're doing well. They're winning at it. And, of course, we are schizophrenic in the United States. Every 4 to 8 years, we're switching tack. And so, Trump said China, 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 and kind of put China in check. But probably at the same time, when then Biden won, to their surprise or to their design, who knows, they now see this is their opportunity. So the 2050, 2030 opportunities now, they're saying 2027, is Biden going to run? How's he doing? Our politics might determine when they do this. And if they do attack to some extent, that might help Biden stay in power because he's the Roosevelt type guy that fights against it or whatever. So there's a lot of play. I can't guess it all. But definitely they're playing chess, and one of them is this communist capitalism that's coming and putting laws on us, more or less, that's helping their economy, not our economy, right? John Bolton was in the Trump administration for a long time. He was the Secretary of Defense, I think. Yeah, Secretary of Defense. And he just put out a opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal about we need a new American grand strategy to counter Russia and China. We need an Asian NATO, he said. AUKUS, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, the US, and Canada. We need a collective that would defend Taiwan. So he's talking about Western civilization. He's talking about clash of civilizations. He doesn't necessarily say Christian civilizations, but man, you can read it in there.
Right.
And one thing I got to be clear is, Pastor Jay, you've sent students over to China as missionaries. This is not about not loving Chinese people, culture, or even the national sovereignty. We would support that they have national sovereignty. Obviously, World War II, we went and lost a lot of men defending China and helping give them liberty, etc. Nixon went and said, let's have trade. So people are succeeding over there because Nixon opened, the doors to China. So, I think sometimes, Americans picking on China is kind of flawed.
But that's a little bit of a straw man argument, right? And I know what you were saying is like, to be anti-China in their government policy is to be some sort of racist.
Right.
And no. This has nothing to do with the people. And I'm sure if you would poll people, it's like here in America, there are people that would not agree with the policies and politics of their government, of their government. But what we're talking about and what Bolton recognizes and the global strategist of his era, because he's older, is that this is a ideological worldview conflict.
Yes.
World War II was not about two different teams. It was not the conflict between two different teams.
Right.
It was the conflict between two different worldviews or visions for the world.
Yeah.
And Hitler was convinced that young men raised in liberty and democracy were too soft
Yeah.
to produce warriors.
Yeah.
Whereas he had produced a generation of,
And same with
of
the
warriors.
Japanese emperor and Tojo.
Exactly.
And, all that. And they had that martial stance, but they were God king states,
Right.
more or less, with the way that their religions went. And so yeah, it was an ideology that we were fighting, and I mean I kind of agree with Bolton in that the Western world has to stand together.
Oh, yeah.
Just as they come together to try to support Ukraine,
Right.
we need to do that in
Well,
Taiwan.
and then there's also kind of been the argument. This is what Russia and of course with NATO and the Western approach of NATO is like Russia's like, well, we don't like that you keep that there's not a buffer of neutral countries between us and them, but strategic advantage us.
Right.
That so we want a world
Yeah,
where strategic advantage United States.
absolutely.
If you're an American, right? And especially we believe that in our way of life and we believe in our ideology and we believe historically that America has been a greater blessing to the world than it has been a hurt to the world. Now, we would get that back to that's because of our founding principles and who we are as a people and whether or not you're a Christian or not. Personally, you live in a government, you are governed by a government and you live in a society that has been influenced by Bible thought.
Right.
The whole point of this discussion.
and free choice. Yeah.
Right, right. And so we want a democratic foothold
Sure.
on the Asian continent.
Yes.
Otherwise, what happens? Now we're trying to keep away a communist foothold in
Right.
North America.
Right, which is tyrannical, has proven itself
Right.
such. And in those Central European countries, where a free market of ideas has prevailed, Western ideas have prevailed, and they want to join the European Union, et cetera, and South Korea, Japan, Philippines, Taiwan, Singapore, Vietnam. I mean, they want to trade with China because they want to trade, but they formulated their own relationships over there. The problem is they don't want one relationship with the United States. They don't trust Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So the Koreans won't make a pact with us and Japan.
Mm-hmm.
They'll make a pact with us. So they have their own American air fleet, their own American air bases. Japan has its own naval with its. Philippines has its own. So that is kind of a weakness
Right.
when you think about it, because those pawns, if you will, are spread out and not connected. But
With each other.
yeah, so Bolton, from his perspective, is saying, man, this is a real issue, and things are changing. Things are changing. The board is changing, and so we have to talk about it, think about it, respond. Now, China has, they say, 300 million Christians, right? There's 1.5 billion people in China, so it's not a majority. We don't even know if they're all born-again Christians, Catholic Christians, or, the Communist Chinese have their own endorsement of a Christian-style church. But you've got 300,000 people that name the name of Christ. 300 million, excuse me, which is almost the population of the United States. So it's not to say that we don't have brothers and sisters over there, that are trying to function. But, I wonder, is there a possibility that Taiwanese Christians could be facing Chinese Christians, mainland Christians, in some sort of battle, or Americans as well? So that, God forbid, that be the case. But John's right. As of late, China's been doing a great job also on the diplomatic front. I call it a juggernaut because they're going and talking with Russia and then Belarus and then France and then Saudi Arabia and Iran. They got them to kind of get together, and now Syria is getting back into the Arab League, and this is kind of Chinese happenings. And obviously it's all lined up against the United States, fostering their worldview. And even Israel is like, we want to sell our commodities in there. We don't want you to decide with Iran and Israel. So Israel's been talking to China heavily. And there is a good relationship between those countries. And U.S. Speaker McCarthy is in Israel today, and he basically spoke to the Knesset. He's only the second speaker who's spoken to the Knesset. And his main message was, I'm warning you about China. Like, this is a no-go. Like, we're best friends, but China is dangerous. This is their thing. And I'm sure Israel knows that. But he's basically saying, you got to pick a side in this coming thing. And so, again, that's the board's changing. China has a pawn on the board, and it's called America's relationship with Israel.
Right.
As well. So there's just prophetic implications of that.
Yeah, this The status quo is that the status quo doesn't stay the same.
No, right.
I mean,
right.
you have to continually adapt to
It's
the
changing.
to moving things.
It's changing, and the fact that China comes out and says we want to create our own economic union, great, free to do so. The countries that want to do that, they call it the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America. But the fact that they're hostile to the United States and they're like, we're tired of the dollar, we want to have our own hegemony, then it's talking about conquering our economy, right? So then it's war. I mean, all war is economic, right? The fighting war is economy by other means. And so the sad thing is that they're all in disarray with each other, really. South Africa told Putin that if you come to South Africa for the latest big international meeting, we're going to have to arrest you. Right? So so I'm saying I think that the dollar I think it's safe. I think we're more in threat from the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset and digital central bankings creating their own. I think we're more in threat from European style dollar
manipulation.
Yeah. Or just usurpation.
Yeah, right.
Than we are from this BRICS nations, personally.
Right.
But there's a lot of people in the BRICS nations, so that's
right.
a lot of.
You mentioned that war is economic.
Yeah.
And that's probably that's where it's most fought, right? Economic wars, trade embargoes, trade agreements and whatnot, pressure. But this is where the growing Chinese middle class becomes an important factor in this, because it's not hard to convince a bunch of peasants to just go fight and fight in a war, but people have a hard time giving up a middle class lifestyle,
right?
And that it requires economic vitality and ability in order to continue it. And once people taste it, they want it.
Yes.
And so we want our products. And now, the part of what the power of America has been is that America can fight a war, and our middle class never feels it.
Yeah.
Starbucks stays open.
Yeah.
McDonald's still has hamburgers. Walmart's shelves are like,
Right.
we don't.
Gas
America
goes up a couple bucks, but yeah.
Since World War II, we have not fought a war that we have felt on our continent, where our citizenry have made some sacrifice.
Right.
Like I'm not sure we don't stay in Afghanistan for 20 years if we were telling people to save their bacon grease and reuse their tires.
Russia has probably had 200,000 casualties, half of that dead. Right, in a year. And we had Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years and had 10,000 dead.
Right.
Less than 10,000 dead.
And some of that was massive fighting. Yeah.
And so, I mean, this is massive World War III type of numbers, and China's more apt to do that. But here's the problem. Since 1973 and this faux thing, let's come back on them with a one-child policy, is that their demographics on population is starting to kind of fall. That's why I say they have to do it by 2050. No, we have to do it by 2030. No, we're only going to have 19 to 25-year-olds by 2027. They're actually having a demographic problem in producing an army. Then with the one-child policy, you don't have a bunch of brothers that used to play football or BB gun fight out in the backyard. You got a bunch of soft piano-playing Chinese singers, really, and they're having a hard time creating hard armies. They haven't had a lot of battles, so they don't have a lot of general experience either. And
there's something about being raised with a bunch of brothers.
Yeah, and so these are kids now that they grew up and they have a nice Japanese car. They go into McDonald's.
Yeah. It's hard to give that up.
They're wearing European clothes, and they like Netflix and all that kind of stuff. To an extent, they have these processes, and then they have to go, and so China's having a problem with their young people as well in that regard. But their economic brazenness is as unthreatening as I see it comparatively. Japan just hedged its bets and had a meeting with the BRICS nations, kind of telling America, we might be unhinging ourselves from you. Like, they've been under our nuclear umbrella all this time, and they still want our military presence there, but they're increasing their own military power. So they're taking a very independent stance, which again is status quo. If China says, well, if we can get, play the bishop and get America and Japan separated, then that's going to benefit us. And that's why I call this Chinese checkmate. And this is going to be a problem. And we've been saying it for a while. We've been talking about this for a while. But it's a problem right now. I mean, this is a problem that's going to hit us. And
it's really Chinese checkmate if we lose our identity.
Right.
If we
If
forget,
we fail here.
and we forget who and what we are and from whence we came and what has made us great.
But if a American style of communism, aka socialism,
Yeah. That's
wokeness,
Yeah.
all these different kinds of things, that plays into our politics, and we have a Biden whose son will take a bribe. We have a Nancy Pelosi whose husband works for the CCP as a lawyer. We have a Gavin Newsom who might be running a Democratic nominee for president, who's governing a state and following rhetoric that helps China's economy, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, we could fall apart from within, which is what the Russian Communist Manifesto, Marxism, always kind of said, that we would fall from within. So that's where Christianity holds us together.
right.
That's where faith holds us together. That's where the Constitution has done a tremendous job at helping us through difficult days. But we're in a time where if we don't become a Bible nation, right? Open you the gates, that the righteous nation which keepeth the truth may enter in. That's Isaiah 26.
Right.
And if you don't have God's hand and God's favor, then we might be wiped out. You wonder why there's no USA in the Bible. You know, is it a catastrophic loss? Is it a rapture? Or is it just
An absorption.
and I say, what's next, America?
Yeah.
One of our problems is going to be from this Chinese checkmate. Well, I think we've got more to talk about,
Yep.
so we're going to end this as part 1, and we'll come back and have Chinese checkmate part 2. Thank you for watching today. Remember, the best culture is a Bible culture. It's proven, and it works.